I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. Roll call of attendance.
Done.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Discussion?
I'd like to amend tonight's agenda
Okay.
to, I'd like to add, and I'd like to talk about and replace policy 509 with the MSBA model policy until the policy committee can review language to ensure we are in compliance with state and federal law. There's some concerns that MSBA has on that front.
Okay. Are you moving to add that to item 10B?
Yes.
Thank you. I have a motion to amend the agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now we need to vote on the amended agenda. All those in favor of the agenda as amended, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. So we have an agenda. Next, we have the approval of the consent agenda. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? I'd like to thank the three groups who are contributing over $56,000 to our district tonight. We have three distinct groups, the Mahtomedi Youth Shooting Sports Group, MAFE, and the Elementary PTO Group have donated quite a bit of money to our district. I want to thank them for those donations. But also, those three groups also give a lot of time, which you don't see on the agendas every week. But those groups, I also want to thank for all the time they donate to our school as well. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. We have no presentations or recognitions tonight. Okay. Report from student representative. I would like to welcome Emma Shores, our new student representative tonight, to the meeting.
Hi, my name is Emma. I'm a junior at Mahtomedi High School, and I've been going to Mahtomedi for 6 years. I am a member of SLC, which is our student government at the high school, and obviously I'm the school board representative through them. I'm also a member of SAFE, which is Students Advocating for Equity, Eco Club. I participate in track and alpine, and I'm on the debate team. I was interested in joining the school board because I've always been interested in student wellness of our school and also politics. I would like to major in political science and environmental science in college, and I thought this was a good way to get the experience that I would need going on into my future career. At school right now, we just started last week, but we're actually preparing for a lot of upcoming events. Homecoming is on October 6th, the football game, and then the dance is the 7th. Also, Lunch and Learn is starting next week, so a lot of clubs will be initiating their first meetings and welcoming the freshmen into the groups. And the Pink Out game is next Friday night, where we'll be raising money for Randy Shaver's Tackle Cancer Foundation. And this weekend, on Saturday, from 10 to 1, Mahtomedi's SLC is having a car wash to raise money, and it's going to be at the auto shop next to Four Seasons. So if anyone needs a car wash. And that's really all that's been going on this week. I'm sure there's going to be more coming up as we get further into the school year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice report. Item number 8, approval of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes from August 10th regular meeting and August 31st study session. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'd like to thank Laura for the minutes. Very well done. Thank you for attention to detail and getting those out to us in a timely fashion. I really appreciate it. Discussion information items, calendar of events. Dr. Larson?
I'd like to draw your attention to 2 things on September 19th and the 20th, Tuesday and Wednesday. It's the MSBA, Minnesota School Boards Association Advocacy Tour. It'll be at the St. Paul League of Minnesota Cities. Senator Uyghur has responded back. He will not be in attendance, and Representative Fisher has responded, nor will he. The other legislators have not responded back to me, but there will be a chance to talk with some of the area legislators. Representative Loon, for example, the chair of the House chair of the Finance Committee, will be there, for example, and there'll be other folks as well. Our first community luncheon is on October 4th. It's a great event. It's for the entire community, and you do need to RSVP, and please do that with Kathy Weiland through Community Ed. And then Emma already made mention about the homecoming thing, but we also have the AMSD, Board of Directors meeting that morning. And then City Leaders Meeting is coming up. That's our City Leaders Meeting. There's a group of mayors that have been invited to come in, and we discuss different issues and brainstorm solutions and look for ways to collaborate. And that first meeting is going to be on October 20th.
Any other items people would like to call out in the calendar?
I want to give a second call out to the community luncheon. I participated in those luncheons, most of them during the course of last year, and I will say the company and the food is extraordinary, and it's Oktoberfest, and so for all of those, it's a really great meal with really great company, so highly recommended.
I had one other event, Friday, September 30th. The choirs from O.H. Anderson will be performing at the Twins game.
And the high school choir is the night before the Friday night, is that right?
Yeah.
Thank you. You know your calendar well. So all our choirs will do that. Any other items? All right. New staff. Dr. Larson?
Thanks. Madam Chair and members of the board, Nicole Flessner, our Director of Human Resources, is here to share with us the new staff that we have hired for the 2017-18 school years across all buildings. And we want to welcome them to the Mahtomedi family and help them with a sense of belonging and partnership in our district. So with that, Member Nicole.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Larson and school board. We have a short list this year. When I was doing this presentation from last year, I realized how few teachers we have hired. So I'm actually going to start with O.H. Anderson. We don't have any brand new teachers to Wildwood other than internal transfers. So we're just talking about new teachers from the outside being brought in. So we'll start with O.H. Anderson. So first, we have Katie Schwisser. She is our 4th grade teacher, kind of going left to right. And then I think you met tonight Adrienne Stromberg was here, and she's part-time reading support over at OH. What's that? And then Holly Hillstrom's actually not pictured. She wasn't able to be there that day for the picture. These are actually taken at our orientation prior to school starting, and she's also doing part-time reading support at OH. Next, we have our middle school staff to introduce you to. Gail Kowski is our part-time art teacher. She's mostly at the middle school, but will be serving a little bit of time at the high school. Next to her is Holly Grahams. She's our school psych. She actually came from Minnesota State College in St. Cloud and then came to us from St. Croix River Education School District. And next to her is Brent Evander, and he's our special education teacher that we hired this year as well. Finally, we've got the high school. And we have 3 folks. Taryn Colby actually is Spanish. She actually taught here last year, but we hired her in 2nd semester, so she missed our new hire orientation last year. And I thought they took such a great picture because she was invited this year that I kept her in there, but she actually taught a little bit last year as well. Bryce Ellison is our new science teacher from 9th grade. And then finally, we have Danny Jadelholm, and he is actually from Bethel. And this is his very first year of teaching, so he's brand new to our district and to teaching. Yes, yep, but he's brand new, so it'll be fun to see. We wish him the best, actually, so. And those were all of our new teachers for the 3 buildings.
Could you speak just a little bit about the hiring process and how extensive it is?
Yeah, I spoke to that a couple meetings previously, but we still use the same screener, which is the online screener through HumanX, and then we have a series of guided interview questions that the principals are trained on that they go through in order to weed that list of applicants down. And then finally, those people that are finally selected meet with an internal group team in the building and then finally select that person based on that. So it is quite a process with all the screening, yeah. Is that kind of what you were? Yep. Thank you.
Item 9C, 2017 ACT and MCA data. Dr. Larson?
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, Lynn Beaker, our Director of Teaching and Learning and Accountability, is going to share some of the data. We also sent out, she also had a link sent out that had all of the data that was on it. A couple years ago, the board asked for pretty detailed information at a board meeting. This is much more high level. And so This is a lot more of the granular stuff you have, then you can dig through, and Lynn would be happy to answer any questions that you have about that. Not at this particular meeting probably, but some other time. But we have done a lot of work with data, and Lynn and her team have done especially a lot of work. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to you to share with the board the MCA stuff.
Thank you for the data book. I appreciate it. I like looking at data, and so I really appreciate it. I know some of my fellow board members might not be as interested in data, and don't feel obligated to read all that. But I thank you. I do enjoy looking at that data and talking to you about it at different times. So thank you so much for sending that book, and I was really excited.
That's wonderful to see. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Larson and Madam Chair, members of the board. Yes, as Dr. Larson said, we did have a data retreat, an instructional leadership retreat, where we did look at the data in details, and then they have the data book in their buildings, and they're digging into the data continually throughout the year. But for tonight, I'll be sharing just the overview of the district-wide results, and we have, first of all, we have some of the district-wide MCA math results, and the one column on the left side would be the 2016 area, and then you have the 2017 area. The bottom, or the first column, says it's students that did not meet the standards for the MCA, then it's partially met column, and then meets and exceeds. And so you can see there within the math area, we did have a slight decrease of 1.3% overall district-wide. At O.H. Anderson, they did have an increase, and I don't have this slide here, but they did have an increase of the overall math proficiency from 81.4 to 83.3. So I was just going to bring up a few of the highlights from the math part of it. We also, as a district, are looking at working with Terry Weiberg this year. He's from the University of Minnesota, on different strategies that we can bring into the classroom to really help close the achievement gap. Our achievement gap right now is at this point is currently 18.37%. So that we're aiming for trying to decrease that achievement gap. So those are some just the big highlights in the math area. This is from Wildwood because they do not take the MCA assessment. That starts up at the 3rd grade level. But you can see I guess the chart to the right, or to the left, is the 1st grade math, MAP score. And the first column shows the students and how they scored in the fall. Now the green is the percent that would be in the tier 1, or the proficiency of the grade level, and then you have the yellow and then the red. The yellow is the tier 2, and then the red would be the tier 3. So from fall to spring, you notice the increase from the 82.1% to the 95.9%, and that was just in the first grade area there. The 2nd grade, we have the 78.7 in the math area, and it increased to 86.1 last year as the students were taking the NWA. The next area, and the next slide, is looking at the gap at Wildwood. So these are comparisons that we look at when we want to see how to close the achievement gap, which is part of our World's Best Workforce goals and part of our goals within the building. And they have the gap at the start of the school year was 9.6%, and then at the end it decreased to 5% at Wildwood. They have to use the MAP scores because of the not taking the MCA, and it was the spring. Then we were able to decrease it to that amount. Plus, there was 91.3% of white students passing and 86.3% the non-white passing at that time. Overall, as a district, we are still top in the state, or I should say not still. And last year we were 2nd, and then we moved up into that first spot within the district. So as we compare, we just did the statewide comparison, and you can kind of see that as we move forward. Now for the reading MCA results, again, we have the columns here for the students that did not meet district-wide for the reading part, and then partially meets. It seems like it's very comparable, and slightly up in the meets category, and then in the exceeds category it looks pretty equal as you look at that. Overall, we went up slightly in the reading area. Of 1.3%. The middle school did, however, meet their reading achievement achievement gap goal by increasing the proficiency and exceeds from the MCA reading test from 78.7 to actually 83.4, which is a pretty big jump up there. They did a great job with that part of it. It also helped decrease the gap between the non-white free and reduced, and the EL and non-EL. So the district-wide, we decreased the gap from 14.1% to 12.8%. So there was a slight decrease in the achievement gap in the reading area. The Wildwood scores in reading, we're seeing a nice increase there with the new balanced literacy program that we've put in place. It's helped to move the students more towards the positive direction from starting in the fall, 56.6% of them at grade level for the reading, and then going to the end in the spring, 84%. And then you look at the second grade too, they had a nice increase too. So as we continue with our balanced literacy, we are hoping to see more results as we move forward with that balanced literacy training and instruction. So we have the reading achievement gap, where you see a decrease from the 23.7 to actually 15.6. So those are some things we're continually working on. And as I said earlier, the buildings have the real detailed data, and you can find the detailed data in that data book too, if you want to dig into that. So overall, we are considered for statewide 5th. Last year it was in 4th statewide. It was just we did increase slightly, but with the scores, you can see that we are still 5th in that part of it. We have statewide science. We went down slightly in the different areas for the meets, particularly in the meets area, but the exceeds is a little bit higher. Overall, though, was down about 3.5, slight decrease statewide, though. And so we are still top in the state for the science scores on the MCAs. The ACT results, we have the 11th graders, or the juniors, take the ACT. Here you can see the different graphs, where the one shows below benchmarks, and then the other one shows the century benchmark and the ACT benchmark. They have different scores depending on, the ACT has the score of actually 22 to reach their benchmark. They recommend that as a benchmark for the ACT. Now, Century has a benchmark of the 19, so we look at overall making sure that the students could achieve at that 19 level. Otherwise, we look at interventions and things that we want to put in place for them if they are below that benchmark. The reading part, we have the students here. It's showing that the benchmarks there for the overall, the century, and then the ACT benchmarks. So we have about 85.6% of the 11th graders that were meeting that benchmark. There's one thing I will mention about that. I said they put in a plan in place for the ACT benchmarks, but they look at other things too besides just the ACT scores. They will look at whether or not the students have passed the MCAs, have they passed the ACT, have they taken the AccuPlacer, all of the assessments, and then if they are not successful in any of those assessments, then they will put an individualized plan in place for that student to make sure that they become proficient in the math or the reading area. So, any questions about that part of the data right now? Okay. Yep. Now,
It's actually back a few slides, but the move from first grade to second grade, I know the cohort groups, because that can affect things, but where they move from first grade to second, so from the spring, first grade, to fall, second grade, is that summer slide?
oh, that was individual groups. I can go back to that. It was actually the past, the first graders last year, the ones that's the same first graders that took the assessment in the spring. And that is a group of second graders, and where they started in the fall to the spring. So they are the same kids. Mhm.
I think,
So-
Kim, what you're trying to get is, do we look at the summer slide data? So when this group of first graders now moves into second grade and they take their fall math test, is there a look at those numbers between fall, or spring to fall, to look at summer slide?
We have other charts and slides in the book.
Right.
If we pull that up too, we do have that where we notice if, if there is a summer slide from the same group of students, let's say they're moving from first to second grade. And then we've changed some of our summer programming based on that. So we had a change in our reading intervention programming this last summer. So we're kind of excited to see what the results are for the NWA. The Wildwood students will be taking that this week, and we should get the results then next week, and we'll be able to see whether or not the interventions we put in place this summer made a difference for some of the kids. So, yeah.
So a couple other things I want to mention, Lynn, that we talk about every year, just so everyone who's watching at home or listening, when we look at those numbers for MCAs and ACTs and we compare them year to year, we're comparing different kids. So you can't look at those numbers and say our kids are losing ground. It's a different group of kids, and so there's just a different makeup in terms of their achievement and their experience, but we still hope all kids do really well. But we can't really compare those and look at it that way. The other thing that I always like to remind people of when it comes to these standardized tests is this is one piece of data about our students. Our teachers pull in so much other data as they work with these kids every day in the classroom and get a real deep understanding of where kids are and how they're doing. And that's the strength of our teachers coming through. And this is one nice piece of data because it tells us something about a group of kids at a point in time, but it's really not meant to do much more than that.
This is just exactly, this is one piece of data, and that's actually why Beth is going to talk a little bit about our student support and the staffing and some of the things we're putting in place besides just the one piece of data here. We have in the data book, as you noticed too, there's a lot of other data that we go in depth and look at individual kids for that. So, Beth will-
Lynn-
Oh, Kevin's got one more question.
On the ACT, you had that, again, graph talking about the century ACT. Now, I'm curious how well you feel, putting you on the spot here, how well you feel the ACT, how it looks at students versus the AccuPlacer, and if you feel like one is better. Again, to Lucy's point, it's one test, one snapshot, but I mean, one of the things that we sometimes hear is the students do okay on the ACT, but when they go to Century and they have to take AccuPlacer, they have to take remedial coursework in one or more content areas, so.
And that is one of the reasons Century looks at their cut score or their benchmark score. They look at, say, I showed that one was 19, for example, in the math. Typically, students that would get a 19 on the ACT would pass the AccuPlacer. And so if they're even close in that area, we do encourage them to look at taking the AccuPlacer and seeing where they would be or where they would score, so that if they do need some remediation before they go on to college, they don't have to pay for a class and not get credit for it. And so that's part of their individual plans when they're close on that line. So.
Plus we have the change in MCA data. So now if you have an MCA score at a certain point in 11th grade, the state system, it's only the state schools, and the ones that have to follow this, you won't have to take remedial courses if you have that score, and I don't know what the cut scores are, which makes a difference for our students as well. If they choose to go to private schools or out of state, then they still might need,
And that is actually a change, but I can't say exactly what the score was either. But I know that is a
Right.
change, so. So.
And so when we offer the AccuPlacer, do we pay for that, or does the student pay for it?
That is usually something if they're going to a certain college, because not all colleges ask for the AccuPlacer.
But I thought you said it was if we identified someone
If
who.
we're identifying somebody at risk in that possibility,
Mhm.
then we may provide it then for the.
So that they're aware
Mhm.
ahead of
Yeah.
time and can get the help. And do you know how many of those we do?
I don't have it right here.
Okay.
Different.
Okay.
it's in the data book.
Okay,
There's always
great.
an N. I think Joy had one question. I
So,
saw.
so I also just had a question about how some of the data was broken down. And so just tell me if this is in the big book, because I didn't look. But it, broken down by white and non-white? Is it more in-depth in the book?
Yes, different subgroups.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
And then a lot of charts and details.
Yeah.
So as you look through the book, and you get a chance to do that, I could come to a study session sometime and really walk through questions if you have some questions.
Okay.
But then in past years, you've come and worked with us with data.
Thank you.
The other piece that we're going to look at this evening is the student support. I'm looking at the social emotional needs. Just to give you a historical perspective, over 10 years ago we started our positive behavior intervention system, which is a PBIS specialist at each site, and their goal or their job is to look at the social emotional needs for students that are at risk. Also, within the last 3 years, we've added a counselor at the high school, one at the middle school, and then a counseling position at O.H. Anderson. We've also, within the last 10 years, added that mental health resource specialist. That person serves to support students as they go out for treatment and come back to the school system, and also works closely with special ed in that same capacity in regards to going out to possibly a level 4 program and then coming back to our district. We also have a licensed professional clinical counselor. That person works directly with students at school and then families at home. And currently they have a caseload of 12 families and could easily go to probably 20 families if they had the time to do so. And then within the last 5 years, we've also added our English learner outcome, or English learner teachers have also developed an outreach program, and that's the backpack program in the fall, and several other things that they do to help support families, to get them into the school system, to get them connected, to help them feel that they belong and are connected within the district. The other things that we have added within the last 5 years, family needs, which you had an opportunity to hear a report on a couple sessions ago. We added that 5 years ago. We're going to continue that program. We're in the process of adding and asking for additional support in this next grant cycle. Hazelton is starting at the high school this year with a chemical health counselor, and then recently we were contacted by Canvas Health, and they would also like to provide a counselor within the high school to support any students having issues with sexual abuse. Services to students, we look at need and have a continuum of services that are provided. With the co-located, we're now able to provide the individual counseling on site. There's several social skill groups, and also we have really looked at our Tier 1 programming, which is the programming for all students, to really strengthen that, to make sure that we're giving support for all students at the level that they require. Some of the programming supports within the last couple years. Last year you heard quite a bit about Win Time at O.H. Anderson. That has now extended to Wildwood. Win Time is what I need now. The big push behind Win Time is often students that needed additional support had to leave the classroom to get that and felt they were missing out on things in the classroom that were also important. What this does is it sets up a time that all students are getting support at the different levels that they need. This fall, O.H. Anderson and Wildwood Elementary really put a lot of time and energy into strengthening and aligning their responsive classroom. Once again, that program is a program that all students receive. Last year, you heard quite a bit about the Lunch and Learn program. That's continuing this year, but really allowing high school students to have time to participate in clubs or to have time to just relax or get their homework done. Really a lot like the Win Time. It gives them the time to do what they need. This year, the high school also added the 9th grade Zephyr Crew, and this is a support for 9th graders going into high school, and I'm sure you'll hear more about that throughout the school year. And then just that social skills groups that are offered through K through 8. There's other things that are happening within the district. These are the things that are more systematized. So there's something that regardless if the staff that's in charge left us tomorrow, these are things that would continue. And that's what we're really trying to do, is make sure that programs are based on need in their programs that would continue regardless of whether a staff member was there that initiated the program. So they're not individual dependent. The Student Support Committee started meeting last year. They'll continue to meet this year. Some of the things that we'll be looking at through our work with the district management group, we realize that we have a need to identify social emotional standards so we know what we are measuring. Currently, the state of Minnesota does not have standards, so we will be looking at a variety of different states and pulling together what we believe are what our students need to know and be able to do in the area of social and emotional. And then along with that, as Lynn said earlier, we're really looking at what are the instructional practices that really promote belonging and inclusiveness. A lot of that is coming through our work with equity. And then also the Mahtomedi compensation plan and the book study on the culturally and linguistically responsive teaching and learning. And we'll be taking elements of that and using that throughout the buildings. Oops. A couple other things I just wanted to mention. On your tables, you have a packet with some of the data that we have been collecting. You'll notice that it varies in regards to, we look at office referrals, we look at suspensions, attendance, fix-it plans are more elementary based in regards to if a child has a problem possibly with another child, they come up with a plan in regards to fixing it. We're really continuing to look at restorative practices and then also continuing to seek out ways to get teacher and parent input. Some of the trends that we're seeing an increase in reported anxiety. We're also seeing an increase in the needs of our preschoolers coming into the district. And we're also seeing an increase in mental health needs. So those are the things that we're looking at and trying to determine how do we support that, how do we identify, how are we proactive so that we can move from reactive to proactive on those things. The other thing that we really need to determine through the Student Support Committee is how do we, or what data do we want to collect, how do we collect it, and what are the tools that we can use to make sure that the data is representative of student need. We currently have the Minnesota Student Survey, and through that we haven't really seen any key areas that need to be addressed. We have our site student surveys that students take every year, and once again, those come back pretty positive. So we're really looking at ways to collect data to see is what we put in place having the impact. One thing that the elementaries are using is the SABRE, and that looks at the academic and the social and the emotional, and that is a screener for all students. And what it does is indicate if a student is at risk. And then from there, support staff can delve deeper to determine if that's a student that needs additional support. Any questions that you have?
Every question I wrote, you answered in the next sentence.
Oh, good.
Questions are off.
I've also suggested, and Mark and I have talked about this, is having this be at a work session too, and we can bring in some of the PBIS specialists, some of the counselors, have a more in-depth conversation. But this will be something, as I said, the Student Support Committee will continue to work on this year too.
Oh, I just had a question about the Canvas Health. When, I was surprised to see that on there. When, this is new, so they'll just be
This
coming
is a week
soon?
ago, yeah.
Oh, a week ago, okay.
And probably not even that long ago, yeah.
So they'll start sometime this fall?
They're ready to go. It's just a matter of us finalizing, but they're volunteering their time to come in, and they would like to have a day.
Just one day a week, you think?
That's where they're starting. And then I'm hoping if we find there's a greater need, then that would be something that we can expand. So, yeah. Hot off the press.
I had a great opportunity to spend an hour yesterday over at Family Means to learn more in depth. We had Pat here 2 weeks ago,
Yeah, I think so.
Talk about family needs and what it is. And I had an opportunity to go learn more about what it does for our district, and it was eye-opening.
Mhm.
That hour was an hour well spent to understand some of the needs. I asked them to tell me, not by identifying anybody, but just make up a story of someone like at Wildwood, a student that might have needs, and it was very eye-opening, and I'm glad that, you gave us that opportunity to see it at a board meeting, but these needs are real, and, from looking at the list, there's a lot going on to work with student wellness, and it's impressive. The back-to-school bash, I went to 2 of those, and that was an eye-opening experience as well. I enjoyed it immensely, and it was really heartwarming to see all the staff that came to do that. And I mean, just networking with people that are attending our schools that maybe we would not normally, always, connect with. And, Mike Newbeck comes to mind. He was there each night, and he's great. I mean, Mike is really good, and all the staff. It was really a nice, it was nice to see that happening. And rather organically. I mean, this is something that the staff has identified and is doing. So, some great work. Thank you.
And it was interesting as I put this together, I think we have a very nice balance between proactive and reactive. And sometimes I think you end up having to do the reactive, but I think we really have been proactive. And now the question is, how do we continue to do that and make sure that what we're doing meets and matches the need? So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Item 9C, or, I'm sorry, 9D, student enrollment. Dr. Larson?
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, this is the annual report that we have about student enrollment. And as you'll see that this is not the weighted average daily membership. This is simply what we call a nose count. These are the kids that have shown up during the first week of school here. Enrollment historically drops and changes a little bit as the year goes on. The final tallies will be, we will have our end results of our enrollment for 2016-17 when the audit is complete. And so it will be changing as we go through here. On the screen right now, you have Wildwood's enrollment over the last, from 2010-11 through 2017-18. You can see that kindergarten went up quite a lot in that from last year to this year. In fact, it's up 24 more students than what we had originally projected. The open enrollment issue was something that had been mentioned beforehand, and yet of the students here, only 16, and that's 8.7% of that class is open enrolled, and so we had a huge number of move-ins as the summer progressed. You can see moving on about where second grade is and first grade, and then the total enrollment that we have there. So this is Wildwood, and one of the key pieces about this always is class size, and where are we in terms of our class size. All of them have gone up a little bit. Kindergarten, we usually strive to be right around 20, and so 20.3 is right in the ballpark where we've been. Last year was the lowest that we've had since 2010, but usually 20.3 is about pretty close to where we want to be. 23.5 in first grade is also fairly close. It's lower than it's been in most years. Just one year, last year was lower than 23.5. But this is the lowest class average we've had of those years here since 2010. And then, as you can see, with grade 2, we had higher class sizes as well. This, again, is a lower class size. O.H. Anderson enrollment here. Looking at this now, third grade and fourth grade, fifth grade, 677 students total. It's a little bit higher than it was in terms of projections. It's 4 students more, but you'll see later on where it is in terms of just where we were compared to other years. Our class size averages are here, and in third grade it's 26.6, and we spent a lot of time going over this during study sessions and what we'd be projecting for this year, and 26.6 is above the metro average. In fourth grade, our class size average is 24.8, and that's below the metro average. And then in fifth grade, 26.8. It's very close to the metro average, and it's our second highest that we've had in the last 7 or 8 years. Second lowest, excuse me, thank you, sorry. When you look at the middle school now, you'll see that our enrollment here has stayed a little bit steady in sixth grade, went up in seventh grade, but dropped by 20 students in eighth grade. So quite a change from last year to this year. We're 14 students beneath our projection that we had in sixth grade. We're 4 students above what we projected in seventh grade, but we are 19 below what we projected in eighth grade. The big concern was that last year we had a huge influx of students that moved in during the summer. We did not get that this year, and we had more attrition than we've had before. So we're 29 students lower in total with that. Our class size averages, though, are pretty positive. They improved in English and social studies, went up a little bit in math, but are better in science and in world language. And as you look at the trend, you'll see that we're staying pretty steady in class size averages throughout those particular classes. In some of the other classes now in ninth grade, when we're looking at the high school enrollment, we're at 306 students. That's 4 less than our projected enrollment. In 10th grade, it's 10 less than our projected. 11th grade is 4 more than our projected, but 12th grade is 9 less. So in all, the high school, even though it's up 2 students, is 19 less than we had projected. It appears that from what we have found is that we've lost students through attrition to either post-secondary enrollment options, or some students who said they were showing up actually did not. The high school class averages are here, and as you can see in the English language arts, the trend has been that this is the second smallest class size average that we've had in the last 8 years. In social studies, it's also the lowest class size average that we've had, or second lowest, excuse me. And one thing on averages is that there may be a class of 34, and there may be a class then of 24, and that would average out. So it's not every single class is that level. In math, 26.2 is our average class size, and that's our third lowest that we've had there. Science a little bit better than we were last year, and same with world language, quite a bit better than we have had. It's our second, it's tied for our best class size average that we've had. Family and consumer science has dropped in terms of class size down to 23. Phy-Ed has gone up 2 students, and health is about the same. So as you look at these averages, you'll see that the class size averages are pretty good, and the averages that we've had in all for the students are good enough. But the problem that we've had is that the enrollment is not what we had expected to see. And as you look at this next slide, you'll see that the total enrollment, although Wildwood is up by 41 students, the total that were down in O.H. Anderson in the middle school and the high school means that our enrollment right now is about 18 students less than what we had projected, or what we had been budgeting for. We had been budgeting for 3,274 students, and we're at 3,256. The budgeted projections, Wildwood was 26 students above our projection. O.H. Anderson was 4 students above, but as I mentioned, the high school and the middle school were down collectively a total of 38 students. We're attributing some of that at the high school and middle school to students leaving the district, and we attribute that also to the high school, as I mentioned earlier, about some students were leaving and taking different options. Question often comes up about open enrollment and where are we in terms of historical trends and the data that we have here. As you can see, in 2014-15, we had our highest enrollment of 3,295 students, and Mahtomedi remains one of the few school districts that will turn away people that apply. This was the highest number of applicants that we accepted. It was 43% of those who applied, but it's also down quite a bit, about 100 less than what we had at our high of 487. So what we're seeing is that enrollment is changing, and we've added 43% students enrolled, but we still did not hit our projected enrollment. One of the issues that's arisen because of that is that there's a desire on the school board's part to have an enrollment committee. We have a a personnel committee, but we're interested in rolling this over to be the enrollment committee. And it'll be a new board committee to monitor, examine, and evaluate enrollment, give a direction about open enrollment and what we want to do in terms of attracting and retaining students. Also, we'll review findings from the open enrollment task force. What we're seeing is that enrollment projections is inexact science, and science is probably the wrong word to use on that. It's inexact at best. Overall, this year, the district has 26.32% of our students that are open enrolled. That's less than it's been historically. I don't have the exact numbers with me right now, but I believe it's to be the lowest that we've had in 6 years, percentage-wise. And as you look through the listing of the grade levels, you'll see that our kindergarten, grade 1 and grade 2, at Wildwood, we're only at 14.74% students are open enrolled. That's the lowest that it's ever been. And it continues to stay low. It gets higher as we go up through the secondary students. So what I would project happening is that as students exit out of the system, as they graduate, we'll see our open enrollment percentage numbers continue to decline. But overall, our enrollment is about 18 students less than what we had budgeted for, which will result in some work that you'll be hearing about when Mr. Manazzi gives his presentation. Questions?
I'm sorry, some of the information you gave on enrollments, could you please repeat some of where did you say the enrollment for open enrollment was the lowest at Wildwood? Because I didn't, you said it too fast.
I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, I have that document. I didn't get it done in time to get it into the packet. I'll pass it out. But it's 8.7% of kindergarten students are open enrolled.
Yeah, I would like that document.
Yep, I'll hand it out in just a minute then.
I know the committee is being put together, but I mean, what we're really trying to figure out is each year, what do we learn from the enrollment experience? And so the data is very helpful, but I was wondering if we could get just in board notes class size ranges for the middle school and high school, because you had mentioned those are averages, and to look at those, because they can be very deceiving. Choirs can be very large, you can have small sections other places, and so if we could look at ranges, I think it would be interesting and helpful to that group who's put together to look at the open enrollment. The other piece I'm wondering, which I'm not expecting an answer for tonight, Mark, we can continue to look into is, you talked about attrition, you talked about PSEO, but PSEO is only 11th and 12th graders. And so if the numbers are dropping in middle school in those early years of high school, I think we need to start looking at why those numbers are dropping, why is there that attrition in our high school? So I'm not expecting an answer.
No, and I can't give you a good one right now, but I do know that at the middle school, we ended up losing about 30 students during the summer.
Is that average what you?
No, it's higher than usual.
Higher than usual. So can we look into that to start to see if we can maybe talk to some of those families and see what decisions they made and why to understand? Because if this is going to be a new trend, I mean, every year we tend to learn something new about the open enrollment process, and it seems this year we're learning that we had great projections. I was really nervous to be over, and was really, really nervous. And so I'm surprised that we're down, but you're right, if we're having this attrition in the summer, and I've talked to a couple of families who've left, who've talked to me, but I think we need a bigger scope than the anecdotal story of one or two, to understand this, so we can share that with that group who's going to work on that, and then use that data to make decisions. Kevin?
That's almost precisely what I was going to bring up. I would urge this committee to think about having an exit interview process, whether it's SurveyMonkey or it's a mailed item or something, or ideally it would be, talk to them personally, but I understand time is hard to find. But SurveyMonkey makes it, ask some questions and then maybe have some area for comment so people can. So we actually, and I think this is something I brought up maybe a year or so ago, that this is something we ought to just have. We do it in business, and to have something really robust that we can see these trends. I have too, Lucy, have heard anecdotally stories from time to time about people leaving, and I'm curious, why? Why would you choose to leave Mahtomedi? And so I think if we could get down to some data on that, I think it would be very helpful. So I would urge this committee to look at an exit interview.
One of the school board journals recently had just that type of thing in it. It would be really worth going back and rereading. I think I saved the article. But it was an exit interview. Why are you choosing to, I think it was about opting out of middle schools.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a lot of very good, thoughtful questions.
So it might be a national trend too that we're just a part of.
Yes, it could be.
That
Mhm.
might be interesting to look at. Dr. Larson, what are the next steps for the enrollment committee? Is that something we'll talk about at the study session? Is that what you envision happening next with that
I'd
group?
like to pull more of that data together that you suggested, and then give that to the committee to chew on. We're not ready to meet on it yet, though.
Right, but we don't really have a committee formed either. I'm asking I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. How are we, what are the next steps in getting that committee formed? Or is that something we're going to discuss at the study session?
I think we should discuss it at the study session. We talked about it the last one, about replacing the
Right.
policy, or excuse me, the personnel committee with that.
Right. I remember not replacing the personnel committee. Yeah, there still might be personnel
Oh.
issues come up, but we're going to change the way it meets. So there's some
I thought
freedom.
we were adding.
Right. Excuse me?
Will anyone be added to it? or no?
Well, we've added teachers and public members to some of our other committees, and that's, kind of what I'm getting at is, would we do that? I would like to add teachers and probably community members to this committee, but I would like the whole board to discuss that. And then also, I think, there's another part, I'm sorry, I just lost it. Well, I'll remember it for next time, that we should look at. So, yeah. Anything else? All right. 9D, preliminary budget after enrollment. They go hand in hand somehow. Dr. Larson?
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, Bill Massey is here to share information about the process that we'll have for that. The state of Minnesota is supposed to provide preliminary budget information on the Friday before this. They did not, and so what we have is the closest that we have, and it's not quite 100%, but you'll go into all of that. So Bill, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss what I feel are probably the three favorite items, the levy, the budget, and the audit. So this will be great. As Dr. Larson mentioned, the preliminary levy information is due to Washington County Auditor and to the Minnesota Department of Education by September 30th each year. That report was released by MDE late last Friday, September 8th. And so at your place, you have just a brief memo summarizing that, and then also a spreadsheet that you can see up on the screen as well, summarizing the 39-page levy report into one spreadsheet. So this is going to be fairly high level, but the purpose here tonight is just to summarize basically roughly the next 3 months from a fiscal standpoint, from a financial standpoint here, starting with the levy tonight and then the next meeting, and then rolling into some work with the Finance Committee, ending with the audit report, which will be presented on November 9th. So I will start with the levy, which, as I mentioned, is up on your screen. And so, as you can see, the 17 pay 18 levy is what we're looking at. And so we're really at sort of an awkward time of the fiscal year, school year, where we're essentially working in 3 years. So next week we get started with our fiscal audit, which will be last year, 2016-17, where we'll find out our final results from last year. Obviously, we're in the school year 2017-18, and we have a budget approved for the 2017-18 school year. Now we're starting already, believe it or not, to look at levy information for 17 pay 18. And what that really is it's levy year 2017 taxes payable in calendar 2018 for our district taxpayers, and then it's revenue for the school district in actually 2019. So it's cumbersome at best, but it does span 3 years. So just important to remember that the levy is 3 years, and in our case, 2017 is the tax year payable for our taxpayers, in 2018 district revenue the following year. Okay, so spans 3 years. The good news item that I have for you tonight is that in total, I'll scroll to the bottom here, our preliminary levy, and I will give you a disclaimer that this is a preliminary levy. MDE is compiling a number of, quite a bit of information here, and this number has changed slightly, and it is very likely to change slightly again between now and when we seek formal approval on September 28th. But as it sits right now, I say change slightly, I don't see it changing by a large amount by any means. So as you can see, our total levy, when compared to what we certified last year, is an increase of less than 1%. It's an increase of 0.62%. So It's a very small increase, and that just shows the administration and the school board's commitment to the fiscal integrity of our district taxpayers. So that's good to see, and what this means is when our taxpayers get their preliminary tax statements in the month of November, that their portion of their taxes attributed to the school district, there won't be much of a change, all things held constant. So that's really good news for our taxpayers this year. So being as it is such a small increase, I won't review everything, just a couple of highlights, and I'll give you a full disclosure since this report is so very new. I've spent my time compiling the spreadsheet and haven't had a chance to analyze every line item, but I will certainly do that by the end of the month here when we seek approval. The referendum, you can see that's the largest amount, and our referendum per adjusted pupil unit is 1,043 per adjusted pupil unit. So you can see what that generates in voter-approved referendum revenue. Skipping down the line to about the fifth or sixth item, you'll see the capital projects referendum. So I like to refer to that as the tools that our teachers use to teach the students. So really curriculum, materials, and technology equipment. So that amount is tied to the net tax capacity in our taxing district, and the net tax capacity went up 600,000, which is a good sign for home values year over year, and the increase in the capital projects referendum is reflective of the increases or decreases that we see in the NTC for our taxing district. Skipping down fourth from the bottom is another large dollar amount, LTFM, or long-term facilities maintenance. So you'll recall in the 2015 legislative session, the legislature rolled deferred maintenance funding and health and safety into this new LTFM, long-term facilities maintenance program. It's a 3-year tiered approach, and the increase that you see there is reflective of the third-year statutory increase in LTFM funding. So that's useful revenue that we have for sort of the longer-term maintenance projects to keep our buildings and health and safety projects going. So skipping down to community education fund, really not much here, just a small decrease of less than 1% in community ed. And then debt service did go down slightly, and this is an item that I'm going to need to review in greater detail, but essentially what the debt service fund is it's voter approved, where we go out and issue bonds for longer term debt projects, and then we levy 105% of the projected principal and interest payments for any given year. And you may ask why 105%? That accounts for any delinquent tax payments. So that's why we do that, or that's why we're required to do that. And then finally, the OPEB debt service fund. Very small change there as well. So in total, the levy increased 0.62%, which is a very, very small increase. And this is just for review. And then at the next meeting, we'll seek formal approval on the preliminary levy. The amount that we approve from a prelim standpoint will be on tax statements in the month of November. And then during the first meeting in December, we will have our truth in taxation presentation where we certify the final levy for next year. Outside of the levy, I'd like to just touch quickly on our calendar of events, so to speak. So this is in your memo format, and I'll go through rather quickly. As I mentioned, next week we start our fiscal audit with MMKR, and so they will be auditing our books for last year. And then on September 28th, which is our next board meeting, we also have a finance committee meeting that night. The main purpose of the finance committee meeting will be to discuss the preliminary levy that we looked at tonight. I want to get the finance committee a look at that. We will provide the finance committee with a fiscal outlook, and then very preliminary audit results. The audit results will be so new, but I do want to get the finance committee involved in that right away. And then, as I mentioned, we'll seek formal approval at the next board meeting on the preliminary levy. Moving ahead to October 12th, hard to believe, but that'll be the end of the first quarter of the fiscal year. I know I realize, and Emma said it, that the school year just started, but we're already pushing up towards the end of the first quarter of the fiscal year. So what I'd like to do is do a quarterly budget update where we present budget to actual and identify or analyze any variances. Obviously, they will be minimal, as it is just the end of the first quarter. So moving on to the next meeting on October 26th, we can tackle the fund balance policy, policy 714. I want to look at that more in depth. How does that compare to other area districts? And what's really the purpose of having a fund balance as a school district? And then finally, November 9th will be another finance-intensive meeting where we'll have a finance committee meeting beforehand. MMKR is scheduled to be here. Our external audit firm is scheduled to be here that night to review the final audit results. And then at the finance committee, we'll really look at student enrollment and how that relates to the revised budget and start to look at some revised budget parameters. So that night, we'll seek school board action on the 16-17 audit, and then that really kicks off the revised budget parameters. So I just wanted to get this in front of you. It is a 30,000-foot view, but I do believe it will benefit us to be strategic as we approach the revised budget. So we'll start with the audit next week, and then get the levy finalized, and then we'll really look at that October 1st student count, as Dr. Larson mentioned, and then just carry on from there. So we have just a couple of keystone items to get done here before we look at revised budget. Any questions?
This is very nicely laid out, thank you
Okay.
for the detail and know what's coming up. The fund balance policy is something we've talked about for a couple of years, and we've talked about increasing that and haven't had time for that in-depth conversation, so I appreciate you putting that on here for us to continue that, and the background research that you bring with you will be very helpful to us. Thank you.
Thank you for such a concise plan. Very nice.
All right, on to action items. Item 10A, approval of the World's Best Workforce Plan. Dr. Larson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Earlier tonight, we had a presentation from Lynn Beaker and shared information about the World's Best Workforce Plan. Our website has gotten kudos from the State Department for being that, and we ended up having some good work with a scavenger hunt about the accessibility of finding it, so the audience who was here tonight for the public presentation was able to see how effective it was. And now it's the time for the school board to approve the World's Best Workforce Plan, and so I'll turn it over to you, Lynn, who's our Director of Teaching and Learning and Accountability.
Thank you, Dr. Larson, and Chair and members of the board, and I'm happy to report that everybody passed the scavenger hunt 100%, so But the World's Best Workforce can be found, and I'm going to share just a few changes for the community so you can see that you can find it on our website right on the front of the side link here. Go down to World's Best Workforce, you click on that, and then it brings you right to the site where you can navigate it on the side, on the far left side. Now, since I went through it in detail before the board meeting this evening, I'm just going to highlight just a few of the changes. One of the changes that we have is that now, instead of having a separate staff development report that we send to MDE, we have the staff development report that's on the World's Best Workforce site that people can look at how you're going to compare to what we're doing in the school districts in the different buildings on the staff development plans. And then we have another change that was put in place was the assessment plan. Under the assessment plans, we have a new assessment, which is the civics exam, and you can read a little bit about the civics exam that is required for students that would be graduating in 2021, and that will be putting in place in the Principles of Democracy class. And then we have the committees and roles area. If you scroll down to find the committee and role. It's up here. Here we go. Committees and roles. Another change that we have for committees and roles is we've added an assessment advisory committee, and the assessment advisory committee is to make recommendations about how to improve the equitable access they will look at the assessments that we're giving and making sure that they are the assessments that we want to be giving, and give recommendations to the school board about that. So we do have now an assessments advisory committee, and you can click on that to learn more about it. The change for the district curriculum advisory committee is that now they have added to their role to make recommendations about how to improve equitable access for the effective teachers and all staff, if they're licensed within that area. So that committee will be looking at, whether or not a student has access to a teacher that would be licensed, and we are very fortunate right now that we do have fully licensed staff within our district. Then there's a change in the gifted and talented area. Go down to that. Gifted and talented, you can click on here. Now we are required to report on here the identification process, which we had on the website before, but it was an identification process that was approved by the board last spring. And here we have the procedures for the early entrance for kindergarten admission, and that will be changing to kindergarten and first grade early admission. And the procedures for the acceleration can be found here too. So for anyone that is interested in looking at that information, we also have a change in the Read Well by third grade area. On Read Well by third grade, now we're required to have a dyslexia screening and identification information, and the convergence insufficiency disorder screening. So if you want to find out a little bit about that, you can click on the area. This is nice because the convergence insufficiency disorder screening is something that's really relatively new to our district staff, to families, and this is a new term, so it's nice that they have we've added a facts question here, so frequently asked questions that they have on this, and so we can just read through that and answer some of your questions, hopefully. And I think those were all of the main changes for the World's Best Workforce, and so I hope that people will be looking at it and we try to continue to improve it, and so give us any suggestions or feedback to make sure that it's easy to use and
Can I have a motion, please, to approve?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Any discussion or questions for Lynn on the World's Best Workforce?
Nice presentation. Very nice.
So Lynn, the changes that were made this year, those are all mandated by statute, or were some self-improvements from our perspective?
Most of the ones I covered here were mandated by statute,
Okay.
but there was a few that we just changed for improvement.
Okay.
Say. Mhm.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving World's Best Workforce, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next on the agenda, approval of policies with recommended MSBA changes or MDE civil rights review changes. Dr. Larson?
Madam Chair, I would suggest that we approve in bulk policy 405, veterans preference, policy 414, mandated report of child neglect or physical or sexual abuse, policy 513, student promotion, retention, and program design, 515, protection and privacy of pupil records, policy 524, technology acceptable use and safety, 525, violence prevention applicable to student and staff, 603, curriculum development, 604, instructional development. These ones all contain minor revisions and modifications, either required by change in statute or recommended by MSBA. And then, so I'd like to do that along with these next policies and hold off on policy 509 for the discussion. That. Then the next policies I would recommend approval of is policy 102, equal educational opportunity, policy 401, equal employment opportunity, policy 402, disability non-discrimination, policy 521, student disability non-discrimination, and policy 522, student sex non-discrimination. All of these policies have gone before the policy committee, administration, in consultation with Minnesota School Boards Association, and this is the third reading, and they have not had a change from the second reading, so I'd recommend these as presented.
Okay, have a motion, please? So moved. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on that large group of policies that we've looked at for 3 meetings now?
I had actually just two kind of implementation questions on policy 515 and policy 604. And 515, I'm just curious, that is the protection of pupil records. I just had a question curious about the distribution of report cards, as we get lots of questions on why we don't mail them out anymore, just as it relates to this policy.
Is the question in regards to it being private, that?
No, just why we don't do it anymore. Just pupil records and why we're not mailing out report cards anymore.
I believe that we don't mail out report cards anymore because we can get them to families electronically, or they can access them on the website, and it's password protected, and it saves us about $1 a report card. I think that's what you're asking.
Yeah, that is what I'm
Oh,
asking.
yeah.
I'm asking why we don't mail them out, so.
You can also access them much quicker. I mean, they're available then as soon as grades are, and we're not waiting for the processing time too.
But they're gone, then they're gone. And so they're finite, that the amount of time that you can access them, and so there's that issue. And when you switch from building to building, they're not accessible. So that's what I'm just, I'm just curious about the accessibility of records as much as the protection of records, the
Right.
accessing of the
Right.
records.
So are families aware of that? I mean, I don't think we need to necessarily answer that, but I think you could look into that awareness piece, and is there something to let families know they need to print them if they want a record of them past the time the child was in that building? I wasn't aware of that.
I assume that they would be on there continually.
Right.
No, Patrick, they're, like, this year they were gone by June 30th, right? Is that what you said?
Secondary report cards are in the transcripts. Those are transcripted, so students have, parents have access to those. The elementary report cards, once we roll over from one school year to the new school year, then those report cards are gone. What we're working on now is finding a way that we can archive those in the documents section of Synergy. And so parents would have them in parent view.
So, the last 2 years I've come asking Patrick, because my kids' report cards are gone by the end of June, and I forgot to print them. And lots of, I'm not the only one. So I'm just.
Right, we send out a message in the e-news when we send out that the report cards are available, that they'll be available up till this point. A lot of people miss that. A lot of people are on vacation or just don't get to it. So that's something that's part of the reason why we want to get them archived and get them into the document section.
But they're archived within the district somehow already, they're not just gone.
Correct.
They're archived somewhere,
Yes.
but parents can't see them, okay. just
Absolutely.
wanna clarify that.
You can still get
It's not gone.
And if parents contact us and they weren't able to print them, we print them for them, we can email it, or we can send it to them, we can get it to them in a few different ways.
Okay.
So, yes, so my question was, like I said, protecting data, but accessing the data as well, so thank you.
Tough lines, I mean, you have to have access, but you have to keep it private. I know,
yes.
So it's tough work, thank you.
Okay,
Any
so
other
then
questions,
I
604?
then I had a question about 604, and again, this is an implementation thing, but I am curious about that new civics test and what that's going to look like on kids' report cards. If you have to say that they have to get 30 out of 50, but it's not a requirement for graduation, are we putting on the report card the grade, or are we saying they took the test?
At this point, we don't have to put that on there.
Excuse me, would you mind?
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't understand the hands.
At this point, it doesn't come into effect until 2021, and so we wouldn't have to put on it, but that will be a discussion, and we're going to find out what other districts are doing too, so how do they mark whether or not the students receive the 30 out of the 50 points for that. And yet they're starting way ahead of time now, where they're giving the pre-test in 10th grade so that they have an opportunity to see that at that time, working with the kids on the things that they maybe don't understand, and then in 11th grade they take it again. So hopefully it will just be, people will be able to answer the questions on that, on the civics test.
But the statute doesn't require us to put it on the report cards.
No,
Okay.
it doesn't. So we're going to find out what other districts are doing, how we actually document this. Mhm.
And we'll probably find out what MDE recommends.
Yeah, I think that would be.
So it was, you know, it was just clearly spelled out in the policy, so I felt like I should ask a question about it, so, sorry.
So any other questions on policies presented? So we have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor of the motion to approve all the policies listed on page 65, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We had one addition to this section, was policy 509. Kevin, you want to speak to that since you put it on the agenda?
Policy 509, something that we did a few years ago, and we have the model policies from MSBA. We decided as a board to add to items I and J. I don't know if, Patrick, are you able to actually throw that up on the screen?
Policy 509.
It's at the bottom of it. So the MSBA model policy does not have an I and a J. And where this kind of came to light was this idea of, it's an open enrollment, non-resident student policy, but we've got in there in J, enrollment as a resident. And the issue that MSBA had with it is that state and federal statute deal with the resident student piece, and the government-issued photo ID is not something that is, okay, is something that we can change. It's federal and state that supersedes then what we've done. And so MSBA, Gary Lee recommended that we remove bare minimum, we remove J from this policy, and he had questions about I. And so the idea here is to take this back to the model policy, and then have the policy committee then review it going forward. Hmm? Yep, that's it. That's the one where MSBA questions some of this. But if you go to J, Gary Lee said this is not where we should be at all. So the motion I'd like to make is that we revert policy 509 back to the model policy upon a successful vote, and then a study by the policy committee going forward, so that we can have something that stands legal review.
So in your motion, are you asking that we waive the first and second readings of that as well and just go straight to approval?
Yes, I am.
Just want to be clear.
Thank you.
Kevin's made a motion. I'd like to second that motion. Discussion from board members? Questions or?
No, I think I just want to see the model policy at the next time we.
It's essentially, what we saw without I and J. That's the model
So
policy.
then,
You weren't on the board when we went through, led by Dr. Larson, a very intensive policy review. We reviewed every policy we had based on MSBA policies, and we went through and added, in this case, I and J, to make things more clear. I don't know if we added other things, though, to this policy.
Well, as I recall, what we intended to do, and what we did do, was try to make open enrollment to have it so people couldn't just come in around the system, so to speak. This was to try to kind of tighten it up as far as people that might come through open enrollment in a way that we wouldn't agree to. And the unintended consequences, it's affected some of our resident students. So,
so, yeah, if we see it in the next round, I think that's fine.
The motion is to actually approve it tonight. And
So we're just removing those. I'm fine with removing those.
The motion
two
Kevin made
sections.
was to replace it with model policy. I mean, removing I and J would be a different motion.
But it sounds like it almost equates to removing those, that our policy does look like model policy, except for that we have I and J. Okay, that's all I need.
A couple things on the administration of open enrollment policy. Number one, credits earned toward graduation were awarded by another school district. That needs to stay in there. We need to keep that because there needs to be clarification as to how students get their credits. Number two, excess costs for special education for non-resident students will be billed back to the resident school district. That's part of the statute. That does not need to be there, but we had that in there as part of the conversation with the open enrollment. Then we need to have something in the policy about a lottery if we have more students than not. And we did change it for number three, that we would, siblings of currently enrolled students and employees' dependent children, they were first preference, so that's been added. That's in the statute, so it may not need to be part of the policy. But part of our issue was that we wanted it to make sure that people were clear if they looked at the policy. So this went above that, and it was not duplicitous, it was duplicative. And so that we did make sure that we had that. We also defined multiple births, that'd be the if twins or triplets or something like that. And then we also defined employees, because we've had people say that I'm actually an employee because I've substitute taught, that type of thing. And so we added those pieces to the policy as well. And then with the 2015-16 year, this is number 4, if a currently attending student moved out of the district, at K-12, then they would have to reapply. That's in the statute. Doesn't have to be part of the policy, but we wanted to make sure that it was in the policy so that people knew that this was something that we were taking very seriously. But it is extra. We don't need to have it in there because statute supersedes that. And the statutes are cited in these examples. The letter J, the 2 forms of residency. At that time, when the committee met, we insisted on a photo ID of a government-issued photo ID, a Minnesota driver's license, or Minnesota identification card, or receipt from one. Those pieces were in there. The other part, utility bill, this is in the policy because we wanted to make sure that people knew that this is how you got into the school district, so there was no trying to circumvent the process. I do want to add also that open enrollment is closed for 2017-18. This would take effect, any changes that we make right now would not take effect until the 2018-19 school year. But this will need to be reexamined regardless.
But my question would be, open enrollment's closed, but when we're asking for evidence of residency, that would be for anyone who moves into.
This is under the open enrollment.
So then how would someone prove that they were a resident without those requirements?
We have accepted proof of enrollment as a utility bill in the past without driver's license, without a photo ID.
So, Kevin, you had said MSBA was concerned about I and J.
Mostly J, but also I.
Okay. Dr. Larson, what's your recommendation? We have a motion on the floor to replace the entire thing with the MSBA policy. But after sharing the information you've shared with us, do you have a different recommendation?
The next policy committee meeting is October 12th. And this is for, and I do want to emphasize that this is not, this is for the enrollment of non-resident students. So if a student is a resident, then it's under a different thing. And that's why you just have to show the individual, you don't need a driver's license for that. So, but if you want to open enroll, this is what the non-residents is.
But the problem that really came up on this was there were a few families that were resident families that were turned away because of this ID requirement.
Right,
So
they
they,
were turned away, you're correct, and now they're here. We
right,
can take care of
but
that.
they're here, but, I brought it to the attention of administration that we might have a problem here. And so that's why I called Gary Lee down at MSBA and said, review our policy versus the model policy. He said, it's not right. The J needs to bare minimum leave, I should be looked at. So I'm just, again, relaying what I heard from MSBA, and we pay them a good deal of money to do our model policies. So I just want to make sure that we're following what we need to follow, and that our families that should be getting in without this requirement are getting in without this requirement.
So, Dr. Larson, what would the impact be of only removing J if the motion on the floor were to fail and a new motion were to be made to only remove J? What would the impact to resident and non-resident families be? Why we look at I?
I think it'd be fine. I do think, though, that the work that was done, I needs to have some discussion about it, because the committee work was pretty adamant about some of these things
Right.
being in there, and so they were included. Now, the fact that it has statute that's listed in policy is usually pretty unusual. Usually it's listed at the end under legal references. But we put it in here to make sure that people knew that this is why we're doing what we're doing, because it was a change in practice.
We're being transparent with new statutes
Right.
to our community.
So having J out at a minimum would be fine, and then reviewing with letter I think makes sense.
I would encourage my board members to consider that as we vote on this, that we could have another motion, if this motion were to fail, to do that. But the motion on the floor right now is to do the full replacement. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion on the floor of replacement with a model policy, please say aye. All those opposed? Say aye.
Aye.
Nay. Motion fails. Any other motions?
I'd like to make the motion that we remove J and review I.
Second.
Okay. Discussion?
This will come up in the policy committee meeting that's in October.
Right. I want to clarify the motion that it is effective immediately, not going through the 3 readings.
Correct.
Okay? And Stacey, that's what you agreed to second? Okay. All those in favor of the motion on the floor to just remove J for immediate implementation, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So we'll add to the October 12th Policy Committee meeting the 509 policy. Right, Dr. Larson? And then this will be implemented starting immediately. Thank you, Kevin, for your work to uncover that and bring that forward. The timing wasn't ideal, so thank you for.
It rarely is.
Thank you for being willing to add that to the agenda tonight and have it go into effect immediately. Item 10C, approval of Minnesota School Board Association legislative resolutions. Dr. Larson, you want to start?
Thank you. Madam Chair, we had a committee meeting, a subgroup that met to make recommendations about 3 different possible recommendations to carry to the Minnesota School Boards Association that they would bring forward to legislation. And then in addition, in front of you, you have a couple of other ones. And so this has gone before the committee. It came back to the board at a study session, and then it was shared in the board notes. And then, so the conversation today is about which of these do we want to push forward to Minnesota School Boards Association, and which of the 2 new ones listed here, or the other new ones, do we wish to?
I'd like to speak to the new ones
Yes.
too before we make a motion. On the white papers you have in front of you, and there's some extra copies at the back, I've put forward another resolution I'd like the board to consider endorsing. About a year ago, the MDE started some committees on ESSA and asked school board members to come forward to sit on some ESSA committees. And so for the past year, I've been sitting on 2 ESSA committees, one on the nationally recognized test at the high school and looking at the possibility of using the ACT possibly to replace the MCAs at 11th grade. That committee is still working. This comes from the other committee. There's a future design committee, and we have worked for a year as a committee. Our committee is made up of 2 school board members, a lot of district accountability folks, assessment folks, some classroom teachers, and we've worked a year with Jennifer Dugan at MTE to come up with these recommendations as asked in ESSA. At our last meeting on Monday, this is why it's coming to you so late, on Monday, we start to talk about, well, next steps. The next steps are, there's a report that comes forward that then lives on the MDE website, and that's where it ends. And so the group got a little upset of, what do you mean that's where it ends? How do we move this forward? How do we get groups to endorse it? Also around the table were MSBA folks. I sat with Denise Dietrich at many of those meetings. AMSD was invited to those meetings. Education Minnesota, I believe, was invited to those meetings as well, representation. And so it was a good group of people, cross-section of education community. So in an effort to not have our recommendations simply go into a report and live on the MDE website, I would like to make the motion to add these to our proposed MSBA resolutions, and these are taken word from word for the report that's coming forward. I don't have one in front of me. Can you hand me? I'm sorry. It's in my pile somewhere. There are 5 basic recommendations. The first one has to do with the accountability system overall, making it more transparent, informative, and actionable.
Recommendation 2 has to do with some alignment pieces, elementary through high school. Recommendation 3 has to do with reducing the length of the assessments, shortening the MCAs by doing away with the above grade level pieces. We get that information through other means, through map testing in most districts. Then some career and college readiness reporting, eliminating that at 3rd through 8th grade. I'm not sure how accurate that is at 3rd grade, if the student's on track for college or not. And then some of the diagnostic information, because again, most districts are pulling that from other sources. This could reduce the test by quite a bit. And then the 5th one is to get some support for some testing improvements related to professional learning. Our district assessment coordinators, a mentoring program, no idea what that looks like, but just pushing these ideas forward to the legislators of this group has made some recommendations. I just don't want them to live on that website. As I said, Denise was in the room and will be able to address these at the MSBA level when they went, if they were to go forward. So I would like to add that to the group.
Question.
Yes.
So do you see each one of these as a standalone resolution?
There's a report. I mean, these are just pulled from the report from the group. And so I would look to MSBA to answer that. Does it make sense to move the whole report forward and say, we endorse these recommendations, or does it make more sense to move each one forward separately? I don't know. I think Denise would be the one to ask.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking of the logistics of this happening,
Mhm.
since I am the reader in front of all those people. that
Right.
If we could make this so that it was in a
More concise.
more concise, and in a way, it's almost like they ought to be separate. I could
Okay.
see these being separate, but maybe we can talk about this afterwards. But in concept, I like the ideas.
Given that I'll be the person reading them again. As your delegate, I am your delegate now, so.
Oh, you were elected?
Yes, I was elected again. so,
Congratulations.
yes. So.
Thank you.
so, yeah. So, yeah, I just need more information.
Right.
Yes.
I have a full report that's in its final draft that I can get to you, but there's another school board member, I don't have her district number on me right now, who is also taking this forward to her district, so we won't be alone in the room
Good.
on this, and I can provide the whole report as well.
Amy Jones?
No, it's not. It's not a board member I knew before. Yeah.
Okay.
Levine is her last name.
Well, I'm sure MSBA would tweak this at the pre-delegate assembly.
Right.
And give their recommendations for
Right.
how we should present it.
And as I said, Denise was there at most of the meetings.
And she was comfortable with.
She was not present because she had to go up to Thief River Falls for the advocacy night. So she had to leave before this part of the discussion happened. But I sat next to her during the final editing of the document, and she gave some good suggestions to the group on some of those things. So she would be a good person to consult with, and would automatically be consulted in the process about each of these recommendations. So would you like to do them, the first group we've seen before, and this is a new one. Do you want to do them together or separate or each independently? Because I think now we have 3 or 4?
3 plus
That would be
the-
3.
3 plus this one.
Well, we're overachievers.
That's what you started, Kevin.
I'd be fine doing them all together.
Would you like to make that motion?
Yes, I move that we approve all of the resolutions as presented.
I second.
Discussion?
If I may, in the,
Yeah,
I've made a mistake when I copied over, and so the first line of the second resolution says, in order to improve the quality of consolidation, that whole first line should be crossed out, and it should start with, the Mahtomedi School Board urges Minnesota School Boards Association to support all students, provide equitable educational opportunities and experiences, and support non-discrimination on the basis of race, color, creed, religion, national origin, sex, marital status, familial status, status with regard to public assistance, disability, sexual orientation, age, gender identity and expression, or socioeconomic status. And the change is recommended to expand the Minnesota School Board's non-discrimination policy to match Mahtomedi's public school board policy. Well, that first line is.
It's just a typo.
Yeah.
Oh, that was typo.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't think we need to amend the motion. We can just cross that off. Okay?
Yes.
Any other discussion or comments on the motion on the floor to approve all 4 resolutions?
Just that thing, asking MSBA non-discrimination policy to match Mahtomedi's. I'm just wondering if we could look at wording on that, because people there coming from all across the state of Minnesota, it just, I don't know how we could word that, but,
If I may, the sentence that changes is to expand the Minnesota School Board Association, that's clarification for our purposes. That's not part of their resolution.
So the resolution just starts with the Mahtomedi School Board to the paragraph.
Okay.
So this is the resolution, this is clarification. Okay. And this, the same as above, the word
Yep.
is taken from, that's the piece for us, so it's just the single paragraphs for the 3 on this page. Any other comments or discussion? All those in favor of the motion on the floor to approve all of the resolutions to move forward, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, school board committee reports, AMSD.
Madam Chair, I was at the AMSD meeting. Unfortunately, Mr. Chevalier could not be there, and so Mike wasn't able to give a report. Basically, the presentations was by Bill Morris of Morris Leatherman about the upcoming levies and bond that requests that districts are making. There are 20 metro school districts going out for different levies this year, and a lot of it was the climate for that happening. That was the large emphasis, and also meeting the new superintendents and board members who were part of that committee.
Thank you. Meg?
You know what, I also had a comment about AMSD and looking at the updates that they sent us this week. To encourage any community members who were interested in attending that education funding workshop that Tom Melcher is going to speak at. That is September 26th from 7 to 8:15 p.m. That is at the Hopkins Eisenhower Community Center from 7 to 8:15 p.m. And I would imagine that would be a really good presentation.
Tom Melcher's stuff is really good.
Yeah.
He makes a pretty dry topic, pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Eye-opening, actually.
That it's so confusing. And the other workshop that I thought was really interesting that they had on that update was the Creating Gender Inclusive Schools workshop that they're having. And I was just curious if we were sending anyone to that, or if there was any interest on anyone from the board in attending that workshop.
What's the date on that one?
I think it says October 24th, and it's at Ties.
Those are part of the AMSD.
No, they moved their meeting to
No.
December 8th.
Oh,
They
okay.
moved the policy meeting.
The October 24th meeting is part of a, okay, it's not a, what are you in? What is the group you work for? It's not part of the chamber. It's another, yeah, it's another group like that. I can't remember who the sponsoring group is. The SPRA is the workshop. Anyway, it sounded like another really interesting workshop that someone might want to attend from the board. So. Yeah, I can, it was in the update from MSBA. I'll forward it to you if you don't get that.
Right. Can we also share the equity one with, or the gender?
That's December.
No, the December one is a AMSC policy meeting, the one Julie just spoke of with the gender. If we could share that with GSA, and the leaders of GSA, is it appropriate?
Yeah, I can
As a
do that.
member of the GSA.
I know in the past, but maybe working with Sarah Dusick, because in the past, I know
Yes.
Rob Harnias was taking student groups, SAFE, for
Yeah.
instance, went to SAFE and supported schools last year. And so this one might be of interest to those students. I think we just look at it first a little bit more, so maybe if we have Sarah.
Sarah
reach out
Dusick.
to you.
That's
Sarah
Okay.
Dusick reach out to you, Emma, once she looks at it, see if it's appropriate for students.
Okay.
I've not looked at it close enough to be able to say. But then she can reach out to you as a board rep and work with you if it is appropriate.
Sounds good. Thank you. Yeah.
Question back on the Melcher one.
Yes?
Is this open to the public? You said it was a community kind of thing? So,
For the public, it's sponsored by Hopkins, Orono, Robbinsdale, Wayzata Legislative Action Committees.
so I'm wondering if that's something we would want to invite the finance committee to attend.
September 26th from 7 to 8:15 PM.
Well, just a thought, I mean, if the community members and staff could maybe attend that, I've heard it, I would be happy to go again. It's, again, very compelling in that last slide that he showed in the presentation, the summer seminar was really telling about the percentage of personal income going to education funding has gone from 5 to 4% over the last 22 years. I mean, that's a big decrease. So anyway, I would recommend his talk to our folks.
Okay, now MAIF. MAIF had their latest foundation meeting on August 14th. And Catherine gave just a really nice overview of what MAIF has provided for our schools this year. In sponsorships this year, they provided $11,500 worth of money to America's Child, St. Andrew's Backpack Program, to Julie Rollings, her outreach programs, and the back to school luncheon for the teachers. They also provided $128,000 worth of grants. In round one, there was $86,000. Round two, there were $21,000. And round three, there was $19,000, almost $20,000. They also provided $48,000 worth of scholarships to 31 students. So, really great work. And as the foundation is gearing up for the fall fund drive, we hope that the community starts to consider making a donation to MAIF, as it makes a huge impact on our students. And also, this weekend, the Up North sponsored party is at Cabin 61 on Saturday evening, September 16th at 8 o'clock at night. And the band is what? Two chicks and a something? What is it called? Is it? What does it say? Two hicks and a chick. That's what it is. It's two hicks and a chick. Not two chicks and a hick. Yeah. Okay.
I'd be careful on that. I've heard really very good praise on this band. I've not heard them personally, but I've heard that they came highly recommended.
So you can still sign up online, or you can register at the door. So.
MSBA legislative.
Well, I think covered it. We're in that cycle where we're going to, either the 19th or 20th, go down to the League of Cities and hear the fall advocacy tour. And then we, again, start the resolution process has begun, obviously, with us and approving tonight the ones we're carrying forward. Those will be then reviewed by MSBA staff. They'll come back to the MSBA board. I'm not sure if we see them. We may see them right here, and we have a meeting coming up in mid-October. And then they come back out. We have pre-delegate assembly where we talk through them. And then they come the first weekend in December. We meet over in western Minneapolis to have the delegate assembly. And the MSBA is the only local unit of government that actually has a grassroots advocacy system where the members bring forward the resolutions that then are enacted or not. This then gives the lobbying staff at the Capitol direction in the session in 18. And so some of the people that come think that they're actually enacting laws, and they get pretty impassioned and excited about it, but in fact they're directing our government affairs group what direction to take. So, but it's fun, and Julie has been congratulations on your third year, and it is fun. Usually we have a really good keynote speaker Friday night, and then Saturday we try to get out of there by noon. Now with all these resolutions we enacted tonight, dear, I think we're not going to get out by noon, but that's okay. It's good. So that's my report.
And then, Dr. Larson, we have the proposals coming from the schools for the conference, because those are due the 29th, is that right?
Yeah, they just submitted.
Oh, okay.
We agreed on them at the last school board meeting.
Right.
Or the study session, and I submitted them.
Okay.
Yep.
I wasn't sure if they were coming back to us prior to submission. That's why I was surprised.
So 916 notes are in the packet I see from Judy. And then one more group we have is TIES. TIES had a meeting on September 8th. Dr. Larson, Patrick, Bill, and I all went and listened. They shared a lot of the changes they've made over the last 3 years, projected some things this year in terms of their budget and looking out the next 3 years. Then they are starting an engagement team to help address challenges that technology groups are having, in particular some of their challenges. Patrick, I know, has volunteered to be on this engagement team, and it sounds like he will be on that team and will be able to keep us updated on that work. So thank you, Patrick, for volunteering your time. School board subcommittees.
I don't think we've had any
I don't think we've had
subcommittees.
any. Okay, that was easy. Any other reports from groups? Okay, Superintendent's report.
Start of the school year was this year, and as always, it's a great, great opening and a terrific time. Kindergarten started the Thursday after Labor Day. A few tears by parents, but not by any of the kids. The kids seemed very excited and happy. That Tuesday and Wednesday right after Labor Day is the time that we do assessments for students, and then the kindergarten students started on that Thursday. The busing has been a huge concern that we've dealt with throughout the year, last year and this year. I'm pleased to say that through the work that Bill's done and the people at First Student, it's gone, or Minnesota Central, excuse me, it's gone really, really pretty well. A few hiccups the first couple of days, but it's gone really much, much better than last year. In addition, the entrance to the high school and middle school, a few hiccups again the first couple of days, but it's gone better, and we still have some work to do with that. Julie Osterbauer has been heavily involved. On the August 31st study session, we heard about some of the things that still had to be done. The striping is now complete. We'll be adding a stop sign, and we will be looking at some lighted crosswalks, but by and large, it's much, much better than it was. So in terms of logistics, the school district's looking good. But that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is what happens in the classrooms on a daily basis, and I'm so pleased to say that when I've been out and about in the buildings, I'm seeing terrific things happening. I've been in all the new teachers' classrooms, welcoming them to the district and seeing what's happening, and I'm seeing creativity and innovation in spades in the classrooms. The students are doing great, teachers are doing outstanding. We're off to a really good start, and so I'm just very pleased with what I've seen so far. Kids are doing great, staff's doing great. I think we're off to a good start.
Wonderful, thank you. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yay.